Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kelly Wright, and I do sincerely hope that wherever you are, that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family, especially in these times of the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, let me get right to it. Here are my opening observations. Over the weekend, did you happen to see the BET Awards? If you did, then like me, you probably enjoyed a night that was showcasing some of the best in entertainment and focused on America's top Black musical stars who reflected on the troubling times we find ourselves living in. Chuck D and Flavor Flav opened up the show. For example, they reunited for the star-studded affair and changed their lyrics to their hit song, Fight the Power, to reflect on the Black Lives Matter movement around the world, seeing protests taking place in response to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, killed in recent weeks by police officers. And one of the great highlights of the evening was former First Lady Michelle Obama presenting Beyonce with this year's Humanitarian Award, and Beyonce receiving that award as the First Lady commented how Beyonce is committed to helping the Black community thrive, stating, "You can see it in everything she does, from her music that gives voice to Black joy and Black pain, to her activism that demands justice for Black lives, and calling out sexism and racism when she sees it." For example, in 2017, Beyonce created Formation Scholars to help young women with scholarships in their pursuit of studies in the creative arts, in music, literature, or African American studies. And throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Beyonce teamed up with her mother, Tina Knowles Lawson, for the hashtag I Did My Part mobile testing initiative to support residents in Houston's Black and Brown communities, which have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. She also partnered with Jack Dorsey, Twitter's CEO, to provide a $6 million pledge to help people dealing with mental illness. And when she finally accepted the award, she stated this. She gave a message to all of her fans stating, "Vote like our lives depend on it, because they do." And those are my opening observations. Joining me now is my good friend and colleague, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He is the president of the NNPA, Black Press USA. That's the National Newspapers Publishers Association. And Doc, it's good of you to join us today, especially in light of the fact that we've seen another spike in the coronavirus. It seems at this point out of control in the states that chose to reopen early.
Well, first of all, Kelly Wright, thank you so much. And you recall it was on your show, the Kelly Wright Show, that the National Newspaper Publishers Association of Black Press of America joined with you in announcing the state of emergency for Black America. This was near the end of February, the beginning of March, because we knew then what we now know, what we see today happening. There's been a steady incline. Some parts of the country have had spikes, some other parts have gone down. But the truth of the matter is, this pandemic continues to spread. And this pandemic continues to have a deadly, disproportionate impact on Black America. And this past weekend, over 35 states now have had increase in coronavirus cases, increase in deaths, increase in hospitalizations. So this is serious. The whole country should have a state of emergency. I know everybody wants to get the economy back, but you get the economy back by having people healthy. If the majority of Americans are sick or impaired or facing a fatal disease, then the economy is not going to do well. So I'm all in favor of having a great economy, but the key to a great economy is having great people have good health care, universal health care. And for some reason, people at state level, some municipalities, and at the federal level, they seem to have triaged the health interests of the nation for other interests.
In addition to that, you were talking about good health care, and we know that Obamacare is on life support as it goes before the Supreme Court justices. This is something the Trump administration has been trying to dismantle since the president came into office. So you would figure at an essential time when essential workers, predominantly African Americans and Latinx Americans, are on the front lines of this COVID-19 pandemic, that they would try to keep as much of that intact to at least provide affordable health care to those on the front lines.
Particularly during this pandemic, I think no elected official should engage in any policy change that makes people more exposed to not having good health care. It's interesting that during the height of this pandemic, they want to further end the Affordable Care Act. I hope the Supreme Court will do the right thing. We'll see. I think that, you know, this is a serious matter, Kelly. And I think that what we do with our news programs, what we do with our public interest programs, we need to keep African Americans, Latinx, and all Americans engaged. This is also the U.S. Census year. This is the year for the 2020 vote. We got to make sure we're not undercounted because of the pandemic, and we got to make sure we have a record voter turnout because, as you saw, it just happened in Kentucky. 90% of the precincts were closed on election day. Voter suppression. So we need to work on all these issues, and I think we have to keep each other mutually informed because, as you know, Kelly, the news cycle now is not daily, it's not weekly, it is by seconds, split seconds. So I hope everybody will go to blackpressusa.com. The Black Press, we're updating now every few minutes because the news happens to us every few minutes now.
Yeah, and it's so important to stay aware of what's going on. And of course, the Black Press, as well as the Black News Channel and this show, we strive to give people the important content.
Right. I want to give a shout out to the Black News Channel website. It looks good. Now, you know, Black Press USA, we actually share information with the Black News Channel. I think the website looks great. It's impactful. And I'm hearing now a lot of millennials, Kelly, are watching your show. A lot of millennials are watching the Black News Channel, and that's good news. I know my son, Franklin, still has blackmillennialvoices.com. That's doing well. So I just want to encourage all of us to stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay active. Black Lives Matter.
Speaking of that, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about the vigilance of the millennials as well as all Americans as it relates to what's going on beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's the epidemic of racism, which we're still finding to be a difficult task to overcome, and yet the protesters are out there to keep vigilance. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Welcome back to the program. I'm talking to Dr. Benjamin Chavis. He's the president of the National Newspapers Publishers Association and the Black Press USA. And Doc, before we went to the break, we were talking about the millennials who have been activated and proactively engaged in protesting police brutality as well as racism. And we've seen blacks and whites coming together to actually stop the trend of the racial divide and the political divide. Having said that, let's talk about Elijah McClain, because that is a story that happened a year ago in Colorado, and now people are rising up to demand justice for Elijah McClain, who was wearing a mask a year ago, leaving a grocery store after he paid for the product. Someone called 911 and said he had his hands raised and he looked suspicious. The video shows that never happened. Yet the police stopped him as he was walking home, and the rest sadly ended in his death, especially after they put him in a carotid chokehold, and then paramedics shot him with a dose of ketamine.
Well, what we now know is that even before George Floyd's tragic death, even before Eric Garner's tragic death, Elijah in Colorado, these chokeholds, these tactics, systemic racism, systemic racially motivated violence by police officers across the country. Because now we're finding out this is just not an East Coast or West Coast or down South. It's in the middle of the country, Denver of all places. Where Black people are being mistreated and Black people are dying as a result of their mistreatment. So we're all calling for justice for Elijah and his family. Thank God for videotapes. And of course, this young man was wearing a mask for health reasons. But, you know, again, if the police don't know anything about the communities in which they're policing, you're always going to have these problems. This is beyond racial insensitivity. This is brutal, taking a life that should not have been taken. And we have to hold police departments now accountable for all this violence that's taking place against Black America.
Based on that, what are your concerns about the failure of the Senate to pass a reasonable police reform bill? We saw the split between Senator Tim Scott, who was espousing what it's like to be an African American growing up in America, particularly in South Carolina, where he's from. He's the lone African American member of the Republican side, and then you have Senators Kamala Harris and Cory Booker stating that the bill that Senator Tim Scott imposed or actually wrote was not strong enough, that they wanted a stronger chokehold bill in that as well, as plus some other factors that they wanted in there. But we've seen the House pass it, the Senate stalemate it, and now here we are with the president's executive order on police reform, which doesn't go far enough in the eyes of many about stopping chokeholds, period.
Well, the bill that the House of Representatives passed is the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. It's a wide, and it calls for the ban of chokeholds. The truth of the matter is, Kelly, chokeholds should be banned by every police department. It should be banned by every state. It should be banned by the federal government. It's a violation of the International Human Rights Covenant. So it's a crime against humanity. And I think that it's an act of genocide. And I think that we need to stop playing around with this in terms of whether it's people on the right or people on the left or people in the middle. We all know what is right. I keep hearing Dr. Martin Luther King's words reverberate in my consciousness as we think about where we are today, Kelly. We are at a tipping point, an inflection point. And the good news is, not only Black young people out there marching, there are a lot of young white people out there marching. There are a lot of Latino Asians, Native Americans. For the first time in American history, monuments and statues are being pulled down, some have been taken down, because these are symbols of systemic racism. I know we're gonna go into it, but I just wanna reference it. For the state of Mississippi, Lord have mercy, to finally take down the Confederate flag symbol off its state flag, that's monumental. That's a game-changing reality, not only for people who live in Mississippi, but in the United States of America. We have to come to grips, finally, with the race problem in America. We have to come to grips, finally, with racial prejudice and with white supremacy. And I think that people have to go to the polls and vote. People want to know, well, why should we vote in 2020? We have a lot of reasons, man. COVID-19, systemic racism, mass incarceration, disparities in healthcare. I could go down the list. Yeah. We have more reasons to vote than ever before. And we should not let anybody dull us to sleep or to make us feel that our votes don't count. They not only count, but our votes will make a difference.
And that, my friend, if we can get to that place called the beloved community, that will make us a stronger America, and dare I say it, a greater America, because
Absolutely.
We'll be our brother's keeper and not our brother's killer. And words do matter. Sir, I thank you for being a part of the program. It's been too long. Let's catch up with each other.
Absolutely. I want to publicly invite you, the NNPA's convention. We'll have a virtual convention on July 8th and 9th. And as we do this program, I want you to broadcast live during our convention. We'll talk to you about it. We'd love to embrace the Kelly Wright Show and the Black News Channel as part of our annual virtual convention of the National Newspaper Publishers Association.
Well, you know, I'm always down for the cause and up for the movement. So I appreciate it.
All right, very good.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis joining us tonight. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
God bless.
We're back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. Joining me now is my good friend, Dr. Yolandra Hancock. And of course, she is a pediatrician as well as a member of the Milken Institute, Public Health Institute there at George Washington University here in the nation's capital. Doc, here we are. It's the surge is out of control, I would have to say, and we don't see the president of the United States or the all of the health experts within the president's team. It seems that they're still going against the president. The president is still going against them. We still have mixed messaging.
Absolutely. I think that's been part of the most frustrating components of this pandemic. The Director of Health and Human Services just today mentioned that if we do not get these numbers under control, we will be in a worse position this summer than we were before we went under stay-at-home orders. And, you know, when we have other leaders, our top leader and his vice president downplaying the numbers, it makes it a very political issue instead of simply a health issue, but it also confuses the American people in terms of figuring out who do they believe.
The sad reality is what you just said is absolutely 100% correct. And the American people find themselves divided between who is in the president's political camp. And then there are those who just say, I want to be in the pro-health camp and
Right.
safeguard the lives, not only for myself, but for others. But you have a problem that you and I have discussed week after week, and that is the fact that we've politicized this whole pandemic, and now people are still dying, and we're seeing the numbers rise. We're seeing hospitals being inundated and overrun because of COVID cases, and people with other health disparities and maladies can't get into a doctor.
Right. You know, it's frustrating when there aren't universal policies in play, right? It truly is the wild, wild west all across the country. You have certain states. I will use Maryland as an example, specifically my county. I live in Prince George's County, and I can say that our county executive, Angela Alsobrooks, and our county council, our health department, and our emergency operations team, they have done this in a very thoughtful, data-driven way. When we do not do that and instead politicize it, we see the outcomes that we do in states like Texas and Florida and Georgia, where even for them, they are now having to backtrack and close down bars and recommend that people get tested before they show up at the beach. We're beyond recommendations. We're beyond mandates that don't have enforcement. This is now an issue of life and death. You can't politicize death. It is what it is. And you can't go back and put the horse in the barn once you've let it run rampant. We have to take steps. We have to take measures right now and prioritize data, prioritize science, and prioritize people's health and their lives.
And Doc, I certainly don't want to sit back and point fingers and say to these governors, we told you so. But the fact of the matter is, if their people had watched this program and this network, the Black News Channel, they would have known our sincerity about the numbers, that this would disproportionately impact African Americans and Brown Americans and Native Americans. But now we're seeing that it's creeping into mainstream America to the point that we might see that 200,000 death mark actually reach, as some study groups have stated, including Johns Hopkins and other places have stated, we might reach 200,000 in terms of COVID deaths. That is nothing to be cavalier about. This is serious.
Absolutely. One of the great things that we did achieve during the stay-at-home order is protecting our seniors and our other most vulnerable populations. The most rapidly rising group within this wave now are our youth. And, you know, we have to remember that even though youth have not been disproportionately impacted by death from COVID, they're still in contact with their mothers, their fathers, their aunts, their uncles, and their grandparents when they go home, even if our seniors follow the recommendations to stay at home. And what we are going to continue to see if our Generation Z and our millennials do not stay at home and follow the recommendations is that what you just described will absolutely happen. It will be our seniors and those of us who have done the right thing in staying at home and avoiding contact and practicing social distancing that will pay the price. My mother, my grandmother are not sacrificial in this pandemic. And I would say to mainstream folks, to the white community, is your grandfather, is your grandmother worth the risk in terms of them dying for you to politicize this issue? I think one of the other challenges, as we've talked about on this show before, is that initially when we started talking about flattening the curve, that was the same time that data demonstrated disproportionate rates of COVID-19 amongst African Americans and other communities of color. Within that same conversation, we started reopening states.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, COVID-19, it's an issue of proximity. It won't be until mainstream communities have lost significant loved ones that we will start to realize that scientists and healthcare providers were correct. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but it is what it is. This is, medicine 101. It isn't until it's in your house that you will realize that you need to do the right thing. And if that's the case, unfortunately, so be it, so that the rest of us are protected.
And that the fact that you even have to make that statement as a doctor, as an accomplished doctor, a woman of science, is saddening and maddening at the same time. I'd like to hold you for a next break and come back, and I want to talk to you about the role that the church should be making in our overall approach to dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm talking to Dr. Yolanda Hancock. We'll be back in just a moment after this. Welcome back to the program. So as many of us are finding out, we're finding out that the COVID-19 pandemic is not a plague that has ended. Now, I'm talking to Dr. Yolanda Hancock, and Doc, last week, the president was talking to a group of people at a rally, and he went on to say that the plague we've been dealing with successfully, and the plague is now ended. When the president makes statements like that, he causes people to believe that when the plague is still here, it knows no end. There's no end in sight that we can see.
Right. I mean, just because you say it's ended doesn't make it so. If you stop testing, that does not make COVID-19 go away. Facts are facts. His presidency was started with alternate facts, and it continues to be perpetuated as he hopefully at the end of this fourth year. The numbers don't lie. We've now hit 10 million people, and the United States makes up nearly a quarter, actually over a quarter of those dealing with COVID-19. It's a reality. It's not that we're pumping the numbers up. We're actually undercounting the numbers when you think about people still having challenges in terms of getting tested and people actually presenting with mild symptoms. A lot of folks aren't being tested because they assume that they don't have COVID-19, and that's just mild symptomatology. And when we have threats of decreased funding for testing, that's going to continue to worsen this pandemic. It isn't that it's going away. It isn't that it's disappeared. And when you have something like a rally, all you're doing is further increasing the number of COVID-19 cases. I feel like some of us are living in an alternate universe where we don't pay attention to numbers. We don't pay attention to science. We don't pay attention to data. Instead, we pay attention to politics and opinion. And in a time of a pandemic, opinion and politics, there's no time for either of those. We really have to be Christ-like, really consider each other, and be truthful and honest. And I would compel any person in an elected position to be truthful and honest in how you present what's going on with the pandemic, because it really is an issue of life and death. And your words.
Absolutely. Let me mention that he made that statement in a church in Arizona. The vice president just traveled to a church in Dallas, Texas, and we saw everybody singing together in that choir without a mask. What role should the church be playing in dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the Black church, which deals with the disproportionality of the effects of this COVID-19?
I believe that the faith-based community plays a huge role for a variety of reasons. When I hear something like Pence being in a church where people are singing, all I can think about is the close contact and the exchange of COVID, because we know that that is the most significant way in which COVID-19 is transmitted. I'm just anticipating the numbers coming out of that church to demonstrate, especially in Texas, where they are maxing out their ICU capacity. It's just, it's ridiculous. And just, it's unconscionable in my personal opinion and my professional one. But in terms of the Black church specifically, they serve two roles. One, in terms of maximizing our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health, and even our financial health. It's an excellent place. We've sought out the support of the Black church since slavery. It served a key role in terms of our survival and thriving through most challenging situations, and this is no different. I think that our religious leaders, our spiritual leaders, are there to provide us with reassurance, to provide us with data-based information in the same way that the Bible provides us a blueprint. So does the data from experts, and the church is an excellent place to provide non-politicized information. And, you know, it's a challenge that we can't be in our homes, our houses of worship, but it also provides an opportunity for us to be able to connect online. And I think when pastors are transparent with their own processes, their own experiences in terms of COVID-19 and in general health, I think that they provide an excellent place, a safe space for us to be able to have information, for them to connect with other stakeholders. To provide that information is key. When we know that Black people are twice as likely to know someone who has died from COVID-19 compared to our white counterparts, there's no better place for us to seek out that comfort, that support, that information than in our faith-based community.
Dr. Yolanda Hancock, as always, we appreciate you coming on this program to share not just your thoughts, but your scientific data and your insights into how we can maneuver through this COVID-19 pandemic and overcome it with hopefully many lives saved as opposed to being lost because of the mixed messaging that we see from Washington. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for being on the program. We'll see you soon as you keep us updated. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So last week I had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing Sergeant Major retired Keith L. Craig, a dynamic man who is an executive at Walt Disney Company. And he's also known as an international best-selling author because of his book, Serving to Lead, an incredible book about leadership. And he's a man who helped Disney get a lot of success in distributing the film Black Panther, Wakanda. We all remember Black Panther and how successful that film was. In addition to that, he also helped distribute Avengers, The Endgame, and then the Star Wars trilogy and Toy Story. The list goes on of his accomplishments, and he joins us now here on the Kelly Wright Show. And how are you doing right now? You know, we're all in this age of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and it's caused us to be on a lockdown. You're out there in beautiful California, which is going through a surge right now. How is it impacting you? And then when you look at the fact that we've got this global pandemic, and then we have this epidemic where it's rearing its ugly head, talking about racism, people protesting in the streets to try to repair the breach. What are you going through with that?
I mean, to be totally honest with you, I'm actually taking advantage of this to be able to reconnect with my family and, internal as well as extended family, and just show them love, give people flowers while they're alive instead of, the latter. So just trying to keep my mind, positive. I'm sort of a glass half full type of guy. So that's where my mind is at right now. And it's very unfortunate that, what is happening is actually happening right now.
I agree with you. It is unfortunate because at a time that we're going through a coronavirus and the African-American community has been adversely impacted disproportionately, and we find ourselves fighting this disease because of our health disparities and other inequities that we have in our community. And now we find ourselves fighting a problem of being accepted for who we are. And I find that we're confronting a skin problem still in America. Well, I recall when I served in the Army, when racism would come up, the military would get active and say, let's cut it out. How can we use those experiences that you've had in leadership and actually expanding our vision and our appreciation of each other, regardless of the color of our skin?
A great question. I mean, I think that this is an opportunity for all leaders to stand up because as you can see, leadership is paramount at all levels, federal, state, as well as local. And the lack of it would actually, we will lose lives when there's no leadership, just, that's out front. So it's very important that leadership, be there. So if we have leaders who don't necessarily have the ability, we absolutely need to try to, if they are appointed, help them with their jobs, just support them even more up until someone else comes there and replaces them. But we definitely have to support the leaders that we have and do all we can to do as far as policies and procedures in order to make a difference.
I should point out that you work with a lot of leaders, even though you yourself, you're a leader there. You were there in the military. You also played professional football. I got to ask you before I go back to that leadership question, because when I read that you actually played professional football in the European League while you were serving, how did that happen, and how did you maintain that hectic schedule?
Well, it happened one day because, coming out of high school, I had multiple college scholarships, but I had to forego those scholarships in order to help take care of my mom and sister. So I came into the military to, obviously, to have a job. So in doing that, years later, fast forward, I was reading the USA Today, and I saw in the paper where the NFL was starting a spring league. It was going to be called NFL Europe. And that's where I saw my opportunity to get back into the game. So I went to my platoon sergeant and asked him about, hey, is it possible that could I try out for this, whatever. So, but no one knew that I was actually, parade, All-American in high school. And I had, skipped those things to come in for a specific reason. But eventually I took leave and went to training camp and ended up being worked out by a few NFL coaches. And that's where I ran a 4.37 and it had a 42-inch vertical. So I tested very well, and I went back to the organization unit and said, I think it may work out, will you guys support me, because it's going to be a long time. And what happened was I ended up getting sent to JAG because, in the military, if it's determined that you're going to make more money than your command, they think somehow that your discipline will be somehow out the window. So I ended up going to JAG, judge advocate, and being counseled and briefed, and eventually they supported me. I went to Orlando, Florida for a 3-month camp and made the team and got drafted, and got drafted by my hometown team in Alabama, but eventually got traded back to Frankfurt because with any new league, a fan base is very important. So once they knew I was playing European Bundesliga football, Jack Elway traded for me and brought me back to Frankfurt Galaxy to be a wide receiver for the Frankfurt Galaxy in 1991.
You're watching The Kelly Wright Show. We'll be back with much more after the break. Keith, let's get the cat out the bag. You're a big time representative for Disney. You're the sales manager for Walt Disney. And I'm amazed. I mean, tell us that part of your story, because you touched on how you're from Alabama. So here's a man from Alabama who goes into the military. You're an all-American athlete. You get to play professional football while you're serving in the military. You learn all of the skills of leadership, and I believe genetically you must have had some of that already in you. And then you've had 3 different careers. In this third career that you're working on right now, you are the sales manager for Walt Disney. That is no small accomplishment.
Yes, sir. I just, bless his faith. But I always, at the end of the day, as I started getting, older in football, I realized that I was an entertainer. So I started to, wrap my mind around that. And you were in Mainz, Germany before, but there were a lot of entertainment coming to Wiesbaden, Germany, but it was no entertainment for the Black American, the Black soldiers. So what I began to do was reach out to entertainment companies in Hollywood, and I began to bring acts over to Germany, over to Wiesbaden and all over Germany, Stuttgart and Mannheim and different places, Heidelberg. And it became a real thing. I brought over B.B. King, the Temptations, different acts that, you and I'm sure we both love, we share in common. And so I realized that I do love entertainment, and I also love serving and pleasing others. So that's when I realized that I should reach out to Walt Disney and let them know who I am and what I would like to be a part of their great, organization. And the rest is sort of history. And since I've landed here, along with being a film distributor, I'm also the president of Salute, which is a resource, employee resource group that's dedicated to providing a soft place to land for veterans who may be looking for, be in transition or looking for another career opportunity, as such as the one I took.
That's outstanding. That's Keith, that is outstanding. But don't go anywhere. I want to take a break and come back and talk to you more about this incredible life that you've had, because I do believe that people who are watching this program can see how your life can of accomplishments can actually inspire them. We're going to talk to more of Sergeant Major retired Keith Craig, who is, of course, the sales manager of Walt Disney, and so many more things that he's done. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the program. So his book is called Serving to Lead, and I'm talking to Sergeant Major retired Keith L. Craig, and just a remarkable story, Keith. If I could go back to your beginnings, humble beginnings, and yet look where you are today, that took a lot of faith, did it not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Faith is what I had to hold on to, especially when you're a young child. You just, you know how it is when you don't know where you're going, but you know where you don't want to be. So you kind of have to just follow that little intuition inside of you and just trust, that what is supposed to be will be. And my philosophy in life is, when in doubt, lean forward, move forward, not pause. So it took me away from, where I was, and took me on to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in basic training.
But you wrote this book, Serve to Lead, and you have lived a life of service. I mean, let's face it, you were serving in harm's way when you wanted to combat, and not many people understand, if they haven't served, what combat is like and what it requires in terms of your heart and soul and brain power to put into a combat situation to serve. To me, it's the ultimate service, other than, as some soldiers have done, giving their lives for the service and the freedom of this country. Share with me, if you will, how far that service goes, not just combat, but beyond, serving to lead.
It goes deep. It means, when you're serving your country, your nation, it's putting yourself in the mindset of, we're going to go and meet the enemies, where they are, in order to protect our homeland, the greater USA. So it requires a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of training, a lot of soldiers, sacrificing families and things of that nature. It's a lot of sacrificing, in that. Even things like the divorce rate is 50%, because you are gone a lot, with the new modern army, 9 out of 10 wounded people, the lives are saved, and they come back, and they are disabled veterans at this point. So they have to live a life of, amputee legs, arms, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, things of that nature. So they've sacrificed literally their entire life, their future. They've given it up for their country. So that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book to just talk about, a disabled vet doesn't mean they can't contribute to the future of this country, the future of this nation. So I also want corporate America to give them opportunities and jobs, and create training programs and different things of that nature. And 50% of the homeless people on the streets have served, You know what I'm saying? So don't look down on those people because, you know, in most cases, they've done more than others have. So it's very important to, you know, just reach for somebody, not know what their story is, and lend a helping hand. You know, and you don't know that it may open your heart up to be a better person in the future.
Where can we get your book?
You can get my book at Amazon, of course. Also, you can go to my website, servanttolead.life. You also can follow me on Instagram, and there's a link there to that's also official Keith L. Craig.
Very good. And before I let you go, you've been responsible in many ways for helping a lot of movies recently out of Disney become extremely popular in the mainstream through your sales management leadership. Can you share some of those movies with us that have gone out there and all of us have seen them?
One of my you know most proud moment was distributing Black Panther, obviously with the first Black director Ryan Coogler and the all Black cast, things of that nature. The all-time grossing movie was Avengers Endgame, that grossed over $2 billion in 2 weeks. All the Star Wars series, Guardians of the Galaxy, Toy Story, Will Smith. It goes on and on and on and on. So I've literally been a part of distributing $45 billion worth of films for the studio.
Sergeant Major Keith L. Craig, retired, but not retired, because he's still doing it big out there in Hollywood. And we'll hear more from him. Don't go anywhere, because July 4th, we're going to hear more about his incredible story and his incredible journey through life that I think will bless each and every one of you on Independence Day. God bless you, sir.
Thank you. God bless you.
Back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. I want to thank all of the guests for appearing on tonight's program, and I want to thank you for watching. Your time with me is very valuable. I appreciate you, all of you. Nina Simone once wrote the lyrics to this song, and she sang it. She said, "To be young, gifted, and Black, oh, what a lovely, precious dream. To be young, gifted, and Black, open your heart to what I mean. There's a world waiting for you. This is a quest that's just begun. When you feel really low, yeah, there's a great truth you should know. To be young, gifted, and Black, you got your soul intact. And hopefully you've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading not fear, but love, freedom, and peace. All aboard the love train. Good night."
All aboard. Let me break it down for you like this. The rhythm of love is easy to find if you're listening. The color of light isn't red, black, or white, but it's crimson. We all bleed the same. If you don't feel the groove, it's alright. Just give it time, give it time. Come on, y'all.